Greetings in Jesus' name. My topic today is entitled, May God Allow Trouble. And my text is taken from Judges 6, verses 1 to 16. God often uses trials, trouble, and tribulation to challenge our faith. Faith is the sole basis of all claims on anything God has provided. That is why the devil fights against faith. However, from time to time in the Christian life, there are situations and circumstances which raise questions in our minds. Now, if God be for me, why then is all this befallen me? The reason will vary from person to person and need to need, but there is always a purpose behind the problems God allows in our life. First, God may allow trouble to happen to you to encourage someone. The stories of the Bible are there for us to lean upon for encouragement. Romans 15:4. God raised up a man by the name of Gideon to lead the people in battle against the Midianites. He was the most unlikely candidate for a national deliverer you could imagine. Please note, it is not my ability, but his ability. I am encouraged by Gideon when I realize that God can use anybody. As we go through our sickness, problems, and difficulties, God can use them to encourage others. We must be grounded between the millstone of trials before we can be bread for others. Secondly, God may allow trouble to happen to you to exhibit sovereignty. If there had never been a lion's den, how could we know that he could lock the jaws of lions? If there had not been a fiery furnace, how could we know that he could cool the flames of the fire? If there had never been a Red Sea to cross, how could we know that he could divide waters and make a way for Israel to cross on dry ground? If there had never been a troubled sea on which the disciples found themselves, how could we know that he could calm the wind and the waves with just his word? Trouble and trials provide a platform to manifest how great he is. Paul's thorn in the flesh gave a platform for the evidence of God's grace to be seen. Joseph's imprisonment served as a platform whereby we could see that God works things for our good. Man's weakness is God's opportunity. Our extremity gives God an opportunity to show what he can do in our situations. Thirdly, God may allow trouble to happen to you to experience sufficiency. No victory for conflict. There must be conflict if we are going to prevail. No conquest if there's no conflict. We can prove his grace is sufficient with suffering. We prove God will provide with needs. We prove his strength in our weakness. Gideon would not have no victory and the power of God if it had not been for the trouble he encountered with the Midianites. Gideon would never had no God's strength until he came to know his weakness. The secret of the Christian strength lies in maintaining a consciousness of his weakness. Many are too big for God to use, but none are too small. Gideon saw himself insufficient and incapable, yet God's strength was made perfect in his weakness. God's grace is, one, a powerful sufficiency. It is his grace. Two, a personal sufficiency. His grace is sufficient for our needs. Third, a present sufficiency. His grace is always there. 4. A plentiful sufficiency. As the need increases, His grace increases too. 5th, a practical sufficiency. It becomes operative in our weakness. In closing, Gideon had to exercise faith in God despite what he saw and despite what he sensed. Whenever God calls us to a task that we think is beyond us, we must be careful to look to God in faith and not to ourselves.